I was standing on my back deck in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, watching the sunrise over the water when I first noticed the construction crew unloading slot machines onto what used to be my private beach. My name is Marcus Chen, and I had saved for 15 years to buy this lakefront property. The house itself was modest, a 2-bedroom cabin built in the 1970s, but the real treasure was the 100 feet of pristine waterfront that came with it. I worked remotely as a software developer, and this place was supposed to be my sanctuary. I had owned it for exactly 8 months, and every morning I would sit out here with my coffee, watching the boats drift by and feeling like I had finally made it. Today, that piece shattered into a million pieces. I squinted against the morning light, thinking maybe I was still asleep. But no, there were definitely people down there, and they were definitely installing what looked like gaming equipment under a massive tent structure that had apparently gone up overnight. I grabbed my phone and jogged down the wooden stairs that led from my deck to the beach, my bare feet hitting the cold sand. "Hey," I shouted as I approached. "What the hell is going on here?" A burly guy in a construction vest looked up from where he was directing a forklift. "Private property, buddy. You need to step back. Private property. This is my private property." I gestured wildly at the beach around us. "I own this land." The construction worker pulled out his phone and showed me something on the screen. According to this work order, this land belongs to the Lakeshore Estates Homeowners Association. We were hired to build a community recreation facility. A community recreation facility. I stared at the slot machines being carefully wrapped in plastic sheeting. "Those are casino machines. Not my business what they do with the building once it's up," the guy shrugged. "I just follow the permits." I felt my face getting hot despite the cool morning air. "There's been a mistake, a serious mistake. I bought this property last year and the waterfront is explicitly part of my deed. It's not HOA property." "Take it up with the HOA, man. I got a job to do." I stormed back up to my house, my mind racing. The Lakeshore Estates HOA had been a minor annoyance since I moved in. They sent me passive-aggressive letters about my grass being a 1/4 inch too long, and my deck furniture not matching the approved color palette. But this was insane. This was actual theft of my land. I pulled up the contact information for Brenda Hutchinson, the HOA president. I had met her exactly once, at a mandatory new homeowner orientation, where she spent 2 hours explaining the crucial importance of mailbox uniformity. She was in her mid-50s, with aggressively highlighted blonde hair and the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. I dialed her number, pacing around my kitchen. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Lakeshore Estates HOA, Brenda speaking." "Brenda, this is Marcus Chen from 447 Lakeside Drive. There are construction workers on my beach right now and they're building some kind of casino." "What is happening?" "Oh, Marcus." Her voice took on that saccharine tone that made my skin crawl. "Yes, isn't it exciting? The board voted last month to develop the community waterfront area into a recreational facility. It's going to bring so much value to our neighborhood." "Brenda, that's not community waterfront." "That's my waterfront. It's part of my property." There was a pause, and when she spoke again, her voice had lost all pretense of warmth. "I think you're confused about your property boundaries, Marcus. The waterfront areas in Lakeshore Estates are designated as common areas under the HOA covenant. Perhaps you should review your paperwork." "I have reviewed my paperwork multiple times. My deed explicitly includes the waterfront." "Well, our records show differently." The community vote was unanimous among board members, and we have all the necessary permits. Construction will continue. You can't just build a casino on someone's property, Brenda. That's illegal on multiple levels. It's not a casino, Marcus. It's a recreational facility with gaming entertainment, completely different. And it's not your property, no matter how many times you insist it is. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a very busy morning. Have a blessed day." She hung up before I could respond. I stood there staring at my phone, absolutely dumbfounded. I pulled out my laptop and found my property deed, the one I had received when I closed on the house. I had read it thoroughly before buying, and I read it again now, just to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. There it was, in black and white. Said property includes the primary dwelling structure and all land extending to the waterline of Geneva Lake, measuring approximately 100 feet of lake frontage. The survey map attached to the deed clearly showed my property going all the way to the water. I screenshot everything and sent an email to Brenda with the subject line, "Proof of property ownership." Then I called my real estate attorney, Patricia Gomez, who had handled my closing. "Marcus, good to hear from you," Patricia said when she picked up. "How's the lake house?" "Being illegally seized by my HOA, they're building a casino on my waterfront." "They're what?" I explained the entire situation while watching out my window as more construction vehicles arrived. By the time I finished, Patricia was silent for a long moment. "Okay," she said finally. "First, don't panic. Second, send me everything you have, including photos of the construction, all correspondence with the HOA, and your deed. Third, I need you to go down there and formally tell them to stop work. Make it clear you're documenting everything. If they refuse, which they probably will, that's fine. We're building a case." "A case? Patricia, I just want them off my land." "I understand, but we need to do this properly. If we rush in swinging, it could backfire. Send me everything today and I'll review it over the weekend. We'll have a plan by Monday." I spent the next 3 hours photographing and videoing everything happening on my beach. The construction crew had brought in heavy equipment now, and they were digging foundations for what looked like a substantial building. The slot machines had been moved under a weatherproof tarp, along with several poker tables and what appeared to be a roulette wheel. Around noon, a black Lexus SUV pulled up in front of my house, and Brenda Hutchinson climbed out, along with 2 other women I recognized from the HOA board. Brenda was wearing white capri pants and a nautical-themed sweater, completely overdressed for supervising construction. The other 2 were Janet Morrison, the vice president, and Carol Henderson, the treasurer. They marched up to my front door in formation like they were storming Normandy. I opened the door before they could knock. "Marcus," Brenda said with that fake smile plastered on her face, "we need to talk about your harassment of our construction crew." "Harassment?" I simply asked them why they were building on my property. "Your alleged property," Janet interjected. She was shorter than Brenda, but somehow more intimidating, with severe black hair cut in a sharp bob. "We've reviewed the HOA covenants extensively, and the waterfront is clearly designated as common area." "Show me where it says that," I said. Carol, a mousy woman who seemed uncomfortable with the confrontation, pulled out a binder thick enough to stop a bullet. "Right here in Section 47, subsection C. All waterfront areas within the boundaries of lakeshore estates are maintained as common areas for the benefit of all residents." "Okay, but my deed supersedes your HOA covenants. I own the land to the waterline. That's not common area." Brenda's smile finally vanished. "Your deed is in error. We've contacted the county recorder's office to have it corrected." "You've done what?" "We're having the record corrected to reflect the actual property boundaries." "This is just a clerical issue, Marcus. You really should have done your due diligence before purchasing." I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. "Get off my property, all of you. And tell your construction crew they have until end of business today to remove everything from my beach, or I'm calling the police." "You can't call the police over a civil property dispute," Janet sneered. "And even if you could, we have all the proper permits from the town. We've been very thorough." "How did you get permits to build on land you don't own?" We presented our HOA documentation showing the common area designation, Brenda said smoothly. The town planning office had no issues with it. After they left, I immediately called Patricia back and told her about the visit. She was quiet for a moment and I could hear her typing rapidly. "They're trying to create a paper trail that contradicts your deed," she said. "This is actually good for us because it shows intent. They know they don't own the land, but they're proceeding anyway. That's going to hurt them badly when this goes to court. When this goes to court, Patricia, I can't wait months for this to wind through the legal system. They're pouring concrete right now. I'll file for an emergency injunction on Monday morning. We should be able to get a hearing within a week. In the meantime, document everything. Every truck, every worker, every conversation. And Marcus, don't do anything that could be construed as interfering with the construction, no matter how tempting." That weekend was the longest of my life. I watched from my deck as the construction crew worked 12-hour days, building what was clearly becoming a substantial structure. The foundation was poured by Saturday evening, and by Sunday afternoon they were framing walls. It was no longer just a tent with some slot machines. This was a permanent building going up on my beach. I took hundreds of photos and videos. I documented every vehicle that came and went. I even used a drone I borrowed from my neighbor, Tom, to get aerial footage of the whole operation. Tom was sympathetic but wanted nothing to do with crossing the HOA. "They made my life hell for 6 months over a fence that was 2 inches too tall," he told me while showing me how to operate the drone. "I had to hire a lawyer just to get them to back off. These people are relentless." Monday morning, I met Patricia at her office in downtown Lake Geneva. She had reviewed all my documentation and looked grimly determined. "We're filing the injunction this morning," she said. "But Marcus, I need to tell you something. I did some digging into the Lakeshore Estates HOA, and this isn't the first time they've pulled something like this." "What do you mean?" 3 years ago, they seized a corner lot from an elderly resident named Harold Watkins, claiming it was designated as common area for a playground. Harold didn't have the resources to fight them legally, so he just accepted the HOA's offer to buy him out for a fraction of what the land was worth. 2 years before that, they took Waterfront from another resident to build a boat dock, same excuse. The pattern suggests this is intentional. They're stealing land systematically. It appears so. And here's the kicker. Brenda Hutchinson's brother owns a construction company. Guess who got the contract for all these common area improvement projects? I felt sick. So this is just a scam to funnel money to her family. That's what it looks like, but the casino aspect is new. That's actually going to help us, because there are about 15 different laws they're breaking by operating gambling facilities. Patricia filed the emergency injunction that morning, and we got a hearing scheduled for Thursday. In the meantime, the construction continued. By Tuesday, the building had walls and a roof. By Wednesday, they were installing the gaming equipment inside. I drove down to the construction site on Wednesday afternoon, staying on the edge of my property line, and filmed everything through the open door. There were at least 20 slot machines being set up, 4 poker tables, 2 blackjack tables, and a full bar. This wasn't some innocent recreational facility. This was a legitimate casino being built on my land. A heavy-set man in an expensive suit noticed me filming and walked over. He had the kind of face that suggested he'd been in more than a few fights and won most of them. "You the homeowner?" he asked. "Yeah, and you are." Tony Marchetti. "I'm the operator who will be running this facility once it opens." "It's not opening. This is being built on my private property without permission." Tony smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "That's not what my contract says. I paid the HOA a substantial licensing fee for the right to operate here. If there's a problem with the property ownership, that's between you and them." But I've got a lot of money invested in this operation, and it's opening on Friday whether you like it or not. Friday? You can't possibly be ready by Friday. We'll be ready. This isn't my first rodeo. He walked away, leaving me standing there feeling helpless. I called Patricia immediately. They're planning to open on Friday, I told her. We need to stop this now. The hearing is Thursday at 2 p.m. Judge Reynolds is hearing the case. We'll get the injunction, Marcus. Just hold on one more day. Thursday arrived and I put on my only suit, gathered all my documentation, and met Patricia at the Walworth County Courthouse. We were ushered into a courtroom where Judge Reynolds, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, presided over the proceedings. The HOA had brought their own lawyer, a slick guy named Richard Kensington who wore cufflinks that probably cost more than my car. Brenda, Janet, and Carol sat behind him, looking confident. Patricia presented our case first, laying out the deed, the survey maps, and the photographic evidence of the construction. She spoke clearly and passionately about property rights and the HOA's systematic pattern of land seizure. When it was Kensington's turn, he stood up and smiled at the judge like they were old friends. Your Honor, this is a simple case of a homeowner not understanding the covenants he agreed to when he purchased property in a planned community. The Lakeshore Estates HOA has maintained the waterfront areas as common property for over 20 years. Mr. Chen's deed includes an error that his real estate attorney should have caught. We've already begun the process of correcting that error with the county. What proof do you have that it's an error? Judge Reynolds asked. Kensington pulled out his own binder and presented the HOA covenants, highlighting the section about common areas. These covenants were filed with the county in 2003, long before Mr. Chen's property was sold. They supersede any individual deed language. Patricia stood up. Your Honor, covenants cannot supersede recorded property deeds. The deed is the primary instrument of property transfer and ownership. The HOA covenant language is vague and doesn't specifically identify the boundaries of alleged common areas. Mr. Chen's deed is extremely specific. Judge Reynolds reviewed both documents for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she looked up. I'm granting a temporary restraining order effective immediately. All construction and operation of the facility must cease until we can have a full hearing on the property ownership question. That hearing will be scheduled for 3 weeks from today. The HOA is prohibited from any further development of the disputed waterfront area. I wanted to jump up and cheer, but Patricia put a restraining hand on my arm. Brenda's face had gone bright red, and she was whispering furiously to Kensington. As we left the courtroom, Brenda caught up with us in the hallway. This isn't over, she hissed. You have no idea what you've started. I think I have a pretty good idea, I replied. You tried to steal my land to run an illegal gambling operation. That's what I've started exposing. It's not illegal. We have permits. You have permits obtained through fraud, Patricia interjected, and I'd strongly suggest you stop talking to my client unless your attorney is present. Back at my house, I watched with deep satisfaction as the construction crew reluctantly packed up their tools. Tony Marchetti showed up around 6 p.m., screaming at someone on his phone about lost revenue and broken contracts. He shot me a look that could have melted steel before peeling out in his Mercedes. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up to find my car had been keyed. Someone had scratched "Stay in your lane" across the driver's side in letters 6 inches tall. I called the police and filed a report, but without witnesses or camera footage, there wasn't much they could do. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from the HOA. They were fining me $5,000 for interfering with community improvement projects, and another $2,000 for creating a hostile environment toward HOA board members. I forwarded it to Patricia, who actually laughed. "They're panicking," she said. "These fines are completely unenforceable and they know it. They're just trying to intimidate you." But the intimidation attempts escalated. Someone filed an anonymous complaint with the health department claiming I was dumping sewage directly into the lake. An inspector showed up and found nothing wrong, but it was still half a day of stress and intrusion. Then someone called the IRS claiming I was running an unreported business out of my home. That triggered an audit notice that Patricia had to help me respond to. "This is harassment," I told her during one of our increasingly frequent phone calls. "They're trying to bury me in bureaucratic nightmares. Document everything. Every fine, every false complaint, every suspicious incident. We're going to use all of this at the full hearing." The 3 weeks until the full hearing felt like 3 years. The HOA sent me weekly letters threatening legal action for various made-up violations. Someone spray-painted my mailbox. My internet service was mysteriously canceled and took a week to restore. Tom told me the HOA was going door to door in the neighborhood, trying to get people to sign a petition against me. But I also started hearing from other neighbors who were sympathetic. An older couple, the Hendersons, no relation to Carol, stopped by with a casserole and told me they thought what the HOA was doing was disgraceful. A younger family with kids mentioned they had almost bought waterfront property, but were told by the HOA it wasn't available because it was all common area. Now they wondered if they'd been lied to. The night before the full hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed reviewing everything in my mind, worrying about what-ifs and worst-case scenarios. What if the judge somehow sided with the HOA? What if Kensington had some legal trick up his sleeve? What if I lost my house? The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. Patricia and I arrived early, and this time the courtroom was much more crowded. Apparently word had gotten out about the case, and several local residents, and even a reporter from the Lake Geneva Regional News had shown up. Judge Reynolds called the hearing to order, and Kensington went first this time. He had prepared an elaborate presentation with maps and diagrams, trying to show how the HOA's covenant interpretation was reasonable and long-standing. "Your Honor, the Lakeshore Estates development was planned as a community with shared amenities," he argued. "The waterfront has always been understood to be common area. Mr. Chen purchased his property with full knowledge of the HOA covenants. He's now trying to back out of obligations he voluntarily accepted." "But his deed specifically includes the waterfront," Judge Reynolds pointed out. "A clerical error, Your Honor. The county recorder's office has acknowledged this error in writing." He produced a letter from someone at the recorder's office suggesting the deed might need to be reviewed. Patricia was on her feet immediately. "Your Honor, that letter is from a junior clerk who has no authority to determine property ownership. It's not an official ruling or correction, just a suggestion that there might be a discrepancy to look into. The recorded deed remains the legal instrument of ownership." She then presented her own evidence. The original survey maps, my title insurance policy, comparable deeds from other waterfront properties in the area that used similar language, and most damning of all, previous deeds for my exact property going back 30 years, all of which included the waterfront. "Your Honor, if the HOA's interpretation were correct, this property would have never included waterfront access. Yet every single recorded deed for this parcel going back to 1994 explicitly includes it. The HOA cannot unilaterally redefine property boundaries because they want to build something." Then Patricia dropped her bombshell. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we've discovered that the facility being built is intended to operate as a casino, which is illegal in Wisconsin outside of tribal lands. We have documentation showing that the HOA accepted $50,000 in licensing fees from an operator named Tony Marchetti. and that construction costs were inflated through contracts given to companies owned by Brenda Hutchinson's family members. This isn't a property dispute, it's fraud and potentially organized crime. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Brenda's face went from red to white. Kensington was frantically whispering with his clients. Judge Reynolds banged her gavel. "Order, Miss Gomez, those are serious allegations. What proof do you have?" Patricia presented bank records we had subpoenaed showing the payments from Marchetti to the HOA. Contracts showing the construction company was owned by Brenda's brother and billing at rates 3 times the normal market rate, and testimony from residents who had been told the facility was just a clubhouse. She also had something I didn't know about. An inspector from the Wisconsin Department of Revenue Gaming Division had visited the site during construction and documented all the gaming equipment. "The state takes illegal gambling very seriously, Your Honor. We've provided all this information to the Gaming Commission and the Attorney General's office. There are likely to be criminal charges forthcoming." Kensington tried to recover. "Your Honor, the nature of the facility is irrelevant to the property ownership question." "Actually, Counselor, it's very relevant," Judge Reynolds said icily. "It speaks to motive and intent. It suggests your clients knowingly attempted to seize property for illegal purposes." She reviewed the documents for several minutes while the courtroom waited in tense silence. "Here's my ruling," she finally said. "The deed is clear and unambiguous. Mr. Chen owns the property to the waterline. The HOA's covenant interpretation does not and cannot override a recorded property deed. The temporary restraining order is made permanent. The HOA must immediately cease all activity on Mr. Chen's waterfront property and remove all structures and equipment at their expense within 30 days. She paused, then continued. "Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the Walworth County District Attorney for investigation of possible fraud, illegal gambling operations, and conspiracy. Miss Hutchinson, Miss Morrison, Miss Henderson, I strongly suggest you retain criminal defense counsel." I actually did have to grip Patricia's arm this time to keep from shouting. Brenda looked like she might pass out. Janet was already on her phone, presumably calling a lawyer. Carol was crying. As we left the courtroom, the reporter from the Lake Geneva Regional News caught up with us. "Mr. Chen, how do you feel about the ruling?" "Relieved," I said honestly. "I just wanted to protect my property. I never imagined it would turn into all this." "Do you think the HOA board will face criminal charges?" I looked at Patricia, who nodded. "That's up to the district attorney and the attorney general's office. But based on what we've uncovered, there are serious questions that need to be answered." The story ran on the front page of the local paper the next day. HOA casino scheme exposed. Board members face possible criminal charges. It included photos of the half-finished casino building on my beach and quotes from outraged residents. The Wisconsin Gaming Commission got involved within 48 hours. 2 agents showed up at my property with a warrant to inspect the facility and seize the gaming equipment. I gave them full access and even helped them document everything. "This is pretty brazen," one of the agents told me as they cataloged the 6th slot machine. "Most illegal gambling operations try to be subtle. These folks just built a whole casino in plain sight. They thought they could get away with it because they had the HOA's authority behind them," I explained. "Well, they thought wrong. Operating unlicensed gaming equipment carries serious penalties. And if we find out this Marchetti guy has connections to organized crime, which we suspect he does, this could turn into a federal case." Tony Marchetti was arrested 3 days later trying to retrieve some of the gaming equipment. Apparently, he had borrowed money from some dangerous people to finance the operation and was desperate to recover his investment. The arrest happened right in front of my house, complete with 3 squad cars and FBI agents. Tom watched the whole thing from his porch with binoculars. The next week, the district attorney announced criminal charges against Brenda Hutchinson, Janet Morrison, and Carol Henderson. Brenda and Janet were charged with fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering. Carol got a lesser charge of conspiracy because she cooperated with investigators and testified that she had tried to warn the others. They were breaking the law but was overruled. Brenda's brother and his construction company were also charged with fraud and tax evasion. Apparently, the inflated contracts were part of a scheme to launder money and avoid paying proper taxes. The HOA itself was dissolved by court order, and a receiver was appointed to manage the basic functions like road maintenance and snow plowing, while the community decided what to do next. Many residents, including Tom and the Hendersons, approached me to apologize for not standing up to the board sooner. We all knew they were bullies, Tom admitted over beers on my deck one evening. But we figured it was easier to just go along and keep our heads down. We should have said something when they went after Harold Watkins. "Is he still around, Harold?" I asked. "Yeah, he lives with his daughter in DeLavant now. Lost his waterfront property for about $30,000 when it was worth at least $200,000. Patricia helped me contact Harold and his daughter. When I told them what had happened and showed them the court records proving the systematic fraud, Harold started crying. "I thought I was just confused," he said in a shaky voice. "They kept telling me I didn't understand the covenants, that I was wrong about what I owned. I started to believe them." His daughter was less emotional and more angry. "They stole from an 80-year-old man. Is there any way we can get justice?" Patricia nodded. "Actually, yes. Now that we've established the pattern, and the court has ruled on the property ownership interpretation, we can file to have Harold's property returned or to sue for the fair market value. Given what happened to Marcus, I think we have a very strong case." We filed suit on Harold's behalf the following week. The case was straightforward given the precedent we'd already set, and within 2 months, Harold received a settlement of $220,000 from the HOA's insurance company. The insurance company then sued Brenda and Janet personally to recover their losses. The criminal trials were scheduled for 6 months later. In the meantime, I worked with a demolition company to remove the casino building from my beach. The HOA's insurance covered the cost after initially trying to deny the claim. Patricia threatened to add the insurance company to our lawsuit, and they suddenly became very cooperative. It took 3 weeks to demolish everything and restore the beach to its natural state. I even paid extra to have native plants and grasses installed to help with erosion control. By late summer, you could barely tell there had ever been construction there. The trials were a media circus. The local news covered it extensively, and some of the regional and even national news outlets picked up the story because of the absurdity of it all. "Wisconsin HOA tried to build illegal casino on Residence Beach" was the kind of headline that got clicks. I attended most of the trial proceedings. Brenda and Janet maintained their innocence at first, claiming they genuinely believed they had the legal right to develop the waterfront. But the evidence was overwhelming. Prosecutors showed emails between Brenda and Tony Marchetti discussing profit-sharing arrangements. They showed bank records of payments to Brenda's family members. They even had testimony from a former board member who resigned because she was uncomfortable with Brenda's schemes. The most dramatic moment came when Carol Henderson testified against her former colleagues. She detailed years of questionable financial decisions, intimidation tactics against homeowners, and explained how Brenda had convinced her that the casino plan was legal because they had worked with the town planning office. "I was naive," Carol said from the witness stand, tears streaming down her face. "I trusted Brenda when she said everything was approved. I should have done my own research." I should have questioned it when I saw the slot machines. I'm so sorry to Mr. Chen and everyone else we hurt. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Brenda was found guilty on all counts: fraud, conspiracy, racketeering, and operating an illegal gambling facility. Janet was found guilty on all counts except racketeering. Carol's cooperation meant she received probation and community service. Brenda was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to multiple victims. Janet got 3 years. Brenda's brother got 2 years for fraud and tax evasion. Tony Marchetti pleaded guilty to separate federal charges related to illegal gambling and loan sharking and got 7 years in federal prison. The judge who sentenced Brenda gave a scathing speech about abuse of power and the importance of homeowners associations acting in good faith. "You were entrusted with a position of responsibility in your community," the judge said. "People relied on you to make decisions that benefited everyone. Instead, you used that trust to enrich yourself and your family through systematic theft and fraud. This court views such betrayal of community trust as particularly egregious." After the sentencing, I walked out of the courthouse feeling like a weight had been lifted. Patricia was beside me, looking satisfied but tired. We had been working on various aspects of this case for almost a year. "Thank you," I told her, "for everything. I couldn't have done any of this without you." "That's what lawyers are for," she smiled. "Well, that and boring paperwork, but this was a good one. We helped a lot of people." And we had. After the publicity from the trials, 2 other former Lakeshore Estates residents came forward with similar stories of the HOA taking property or pressuring them into unfavorable agreements. Patricia helped them file claims that were quickly settled once the defendants realized they had no defense. The Lakeshore Estates community held a special meeting to discuss the future of the HOA. The overwhelming consensus was to start fresh with new bylaws, new leadership, and strict oversight requirements. Tom was elected as the new president, largely because he had no interest in the job, and everyone agreed that was probably a good qualification. "I hereby declare that the new HOA's primary mission is to mind our own business and only get involved when absolutely necessary," Tom announced at his first board meeting, which I attended as an observer. Everyone applauded. The new board's first official act was to commission a professional survey of all property boundaries in the community to ensure there were no further disputes. They also hired a law firm to review the covenants and make sure they were clear and didn't contradict any recorded deeds. Life slowly returned to normal. I went back to my routine of morning coffee on the deck, watching the sunrise over the water. The beach was peaceful again, with just the sound of waves and the occasional boat. Exactly what I had wanted when I bought the place. I did make some changes, though. I installed security cameras around my property, both as a precaution and because Patricia suggested it. I also got involved in local government, attending town planning meetings, and serving on a committee to review HOA regulations throughout the county. If my experience could help prevent someone else from going through the same nightmare, it was worth the time. One warm evening in September, almost exactly a year after the construction crew first showed up on my beach, I hosted a barbecue for my neighbors. Harold and his daughter drove up from DeLavin. Tom brought his family. The Hendersons came with their famous potato salad. Even Patricia stopped by with her husband. We sat on my restored beach, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, and I felt genuinely content. The property that had been the source of so much stress and conflict was finally just what I wanted it to be: home. "So," Tom said, raising his beer in a toast, "to property rights, good lawyers, and the end of tyrannical HOA boards. To never taking anything for granted," Harold added quietly. "And to people like Marcus who stand up when it would be easier to back down. We all drank to that. As the evening grew darker and the fireflies came out, people started sharing their own HOA horror stories, though none quite matched mine. It became a running joke that I had the ultimate HOA story, the one that would be told at neighborhood gatherings for years to come. Remember when the HOA tried to build a casino on Marcus's beach? Would become a legendary opening line. Later that night, after everyone had left and I was cleaning up, my phone rang. It was an unknown number and I almost didn't answer, still wary after everything that had happened, but curiosity got the better of me. "Mr. Chen," a woman's voice I didn't recognize. "My name is Sarah Martinez. I'm a reporter with the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. I'm working on a story about HOA overreach and abuse in Wisconsin. I'd love to interview you about your experience." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to just put the whole thing behind me and move on. But another part remembered Harold's face when he talked about being gaslit into believing he didn't own his own property. I thought about other people who might be going through something similar right now, feeling powerless and alone. "Sure," I said. "I can talk to you when works for you." The article ran a month later as a multi-part investigative series. It featured my story prominently, but also included dozens of other cases of HOA abuse throughout Wisconsin. It detailed how some HOAs had become little fiefdoms run by petty tyrants who used their position for personal gain. The series won a state journalism award and prompted the Wisconsin legislature to pass new laws regulating HOA powers and requiring more transparency and accountability. I was invited to testify before the state assembly when they were considering the legislation. Standing at the podium in the Capitol building in Madison, I told my story one more time, emphasizing not just what happened to me but what could have happened if I hadn't had the resources to fight back. "I was lucky," I told the assembled legislators. "I had savings to hire a good lawyer, I had documentation to prove my case, I had the time and energy to fight." But many homeowners don't have those advantages. They're elderly or on fixed incomes or just worn down by life. When an HOA tells them they're wrong about their property rights, they believe it. When an HOA threatens them with fines and legal action, they cave because they can't afford to fight. The power imbalance is enormous, and without proper oversight and accountability, that power will be abused. The legislation passed with bipartisan support. Among other provisions, it required HOAs to carry insurance specifically covering property disputes, mandated annual audits by independent accountants, required HOA boards to get homeowner approval for any expenditure over $10,000, and created a state office where homeowners could file complaints about HOA abuse. Governor Tony Evers signed it into law that December, and I was invited to the signing ceremony. Standing there watching him sign the bill that bore the somewhat unwieldy name the Homeowner Protection and HOA Accountability Act, I felt proud. Something good had come from my nightmare. Back home, I settled into a peaceful winter. The lake froze over and I took up ice fishing, sitting in a heated shelter on the ice with Tom and some other neighbors, drinking hot cocoa and mostly not catching anything. It was perfect. Brenda and Janet were both serving their sentences at a women's prison in Taycheedah. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Brenda was still insisting she had done nothing wrong and was planning appeals. Janet had apparently taken a more reflective approach and was participating in prison programs. I didn't have strong feelings about either of them anymore. They had faced consequences for their actions, and that was enough. Tony Marchetti was in federal prison in Minnesota, and according to news reports, was cooperating with authorities in investigations of larger organized crime networks. His cooperation had led to several other arrests. I found it grimly funny that my quiet little property dispute had somehow contributed to taking down part of a criminal organization. Carol Henderson had completed her community service and was working at a nonprofit helping elderly people understand their legal rights. She sent me a letter apologizing again and explaining that she was trying to make amends by preventing others from being victimized. I wrote back telling her I appreciated the apology and that she should focus on moving forward. Spring came, and with it the return of boat traffic on the lake. I started swimming again in the mornings, diving off my dock into the cold, clear water. Every time I did, I felt grateful that I had fought to keep this place, that I hadn't let the HOA intimidate me into giving up. Patricia stopped by one afternoon in April with news. "The last of the related lawsuits has been settled," she told me. "Everyone who was wronged by the old HOA board has received compensation. And the insurance company has filed bankruptcy because the claims exceeded their reserves. They're being investigated for their own role in enabling the fraud. So it's really over." It's really over. Well, except for the mountain of paperwork, but that's my problem, not yours. We sat on the deck drinking iced tea and watching a family of ducks paddle by. "You know what the best part is," I said. "This place feels like mine again. For a while there, it felt tainted by all the conflict and stress. But now when I look at the beach, I don't think about the casino or the trial or any of that. I just see the beach." "That's good," Patricia said. "That's how it should be. You fought for your home and you won, now you get to enjoy it." And I did. Through that summer and fall, through another winter and into the next spring. I started a tradition of hosting an annual party on my beach to celebrate the anniversary of the judge's ruling. It became a community event, with neighbors bringing food and drinks, kids playing in the sand, and everyone enjoying the waterfront that had been the center of so much drama. At the second annual party, Harold showed up with his daughter and grandchildren. He had used his settlement money to buy a small condo in Lake Geneva, close enough to visit the lake regularly. Watching him play with his grandkids in the shallow water, I felt good about everything we had been through. It hadn't just been about me protecting my property. It had been about standing up to bullies, about making sure powerful people couldn't abuse those with less power, about community and doing what was right even when it was hard. Tom gave another toast that evening. To Marcus, who taught us that sometimes the best thing you can do is stand your ground and refuse to be moved, even when it seems like the whole world is telling you to give up. I clinked my beer bottle against his and looked around at the faces of my friends and neighbors, at the lake stretching out behind them, at the home I had fought so hard to protect. It had been worth it. Every moment of stress, every legal bill, every sleepless night, this was worth it. The sun set over Geneva Lake, painting the water gold and orange. Somewhere out there, boats were cruising, fishermen were casting their lines, families were making memories. And here on my little stretch of beach, surrounded by good people, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The HOA had tried to take it from me. They had tried to build their illegal empire on my waterfront, to turn my peaceful sanctuary into a gambling operation that would have destroyed the neighborhood. They had lied, cheated, and stolen to make it happen, but in the end, the deed didn't lie, the law didn't bend, and justice, though it took time, prevailed. I was standing on my deck the next morning, coffee in hand, watching another sunrise over the water when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Patricia. "Just got word that Brenda's appeal was denied. She's staying in prison, thought you'd want to know." I typed back a quick thanks and put my phone away. I didn't need to follow that story anymore. That chapter was closed. This was my life now, exactly as I had dreamed it would be when I first bought this place. A blue heron landed on my dock, standing perfectly still as it watched for fish. I watched it, appreciating the simple beauty of the moment. This was what I had fought for, not just the legal right to own property, though that mattered. I had fought for moments like this. For peace, for home. The heron took flight, its wings spread wide as it glided across the lake, and I raised my coffee cup in a silent salute to property rights, to standing up for yourself, to the power of documentation and good legal representation, to community and justice and the American principle that your home is your castle, and no one can take it from you without due process. The casino was gone. The criminals were in prison. The corrupt HOA was dissolved, and I was here on my waterfront living the life I had worked so hard to build. It didn't get much better than that.